parents promised to support my college plans, then pulled their help after hearing rumors about my friends forcing me to choose between keeping peace at home or standing up for myself while preparing to leave with no money and no future. I'm Callum, 27, grew up in a small town in upstate New York, and honestly, I thought I had my life mapped out until everything just collapsed around me. My parents, Oren, 55, and Leona, 53, had always said college would be my ticket out, that they'd support me no matter what, but it all changed after some rumors hit our little circle, and I couldn't even tell who was telling the truth or who was twisting it. It was a Friday night, late summer, the kind of heat that makes you sticky and restless, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at a pile of acceptance letters and scholarship forms, and for a second, I felt like maybe I could actually do this, move away, finally be free. But then my mom came in, her voice clipped, eyes sharp like knives, and she said, "We don't think it's a good idea anymore, Callum. Maybe you need to stay here a while." And I froze, my stomach knotting because I didn't understand. "What do you mean? I got the scholarships, I have the grants, everything's ready," I shouted, though my voice cracked, and she didn't answer at first. My dad, sitting in the recliner with a beer in his hand, didn't even look at me. He just muttered something about friends influencing decisions, and my blood ran cold. I'd been warned about this, about the whispers that my friends, some older kids from town who had drifted into sketchy circles, were talking behind my back, but I never thought it would reach my parents like this. It wasn't even anything illegal or crazy, just the kind of teen mistakes you make when you're curious and a little bored, but to them, apparently it was enough to pull the rug out from under me. I remember pacing my room, papers in hand, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, because they were offering nothing, no support, no money, not even advice. I didn't know if I should scream, cry, or just run out the door and disappear into the night, and part of me almost did, just to see if the world outside would at least give me a chance. My best friend, Yarek, 28, had been there since middle school, always dragging me into harmless trouble, and he tried to help me reason, saying, "Callum, maybe wait, maybe." But I cut him off because waiting wasn't an option. I had worked too hard to let some vague fear or rumor stop me now. I kept going over the conversations in my head, remembering my mom's face when she said, "Your friends, Callum, they're not the kind of influence we want." And then, like a punch to the gut, I realized that standing up for myself meant defying them, probably losing their trust completely. The guilt hit me harder than anger because they'd been my anchors for 27 years. And now, I was suddenly alone, figuring out how to leave with no money, no real plan, and no one willing to help me. I remember the night stretching on, my lamp flickering, the silence of the house pressing in, and me thinking about all the nights I'd stayed up, dreaming about being in a city far from here, maybe studying something I loved, maybe finally living for myself. But the reality was that I had to choose between peace at home and the life I wanted, and both seemed impossible. I started making lists, the kind of meticulous, obsessive lists you make when your back is against the wall: tuition, rent, bus tickets, job options, anything I could do to make it work alone. My stomach hurt from the worry, my hands trembled as I calculated how much I had in savings versus how much I would need, and every number seemed to mock me, every potential plan slipping through my fingers like water. I tried calling my Uncle Farley, who sometimes helped out financially, but even he hesitated, saying, "Callum, maybe it's better to stay put for now." And that hesitation felt like betrayal. I spent hours pacing, sitting, staring, trying to figure out how I could pack everything, leave, and survive without anyone footing the bills or even saying, "Go get your dream." I remembered the small moments from earlier that year, my dad proudly saying, "You'll get there, kiddo," or my mom baking my favorite cookies when I got good grades. And now those memories were twisted, sour, because it felt like they had been just promises with no weight. I didn't even sleep that night. I just lay awake, thinking about how rumors had more power than hard work, how a few words could dismantle everything you've ever built for yourself, and the sting of betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. By dawn, I was already planning what I could sell, what I could pawn, anything to get a plane ticket or bus fare, to prove to myself that I could still do it, even if no one else believed in me anymore. I kept thinking about my friends, the ones accused of corrupting me, and part of me wanted to yell at them, demand they fix this. But another part knew that I had to rely on no one but myself, and the weight of that responsibility was crushing. Everything felt like a test I hadn't signed up for, a labyrinth with walls made of judgment, fear, and mistrust, and the only way forward was through it, even if it meant stepping into the unknown alone. I woke up the next morning feeling hollow, like the world had shifted while I slept and left me behind. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, thinking about how to explain to my parents that I wasn't some reckless kid being led astray, that I could handle myself, but every word I imagined came out bitter, defensive, and useless. I decided to go for a walk, just to clear my head, and ended up at the old park near our neighborhood, the one where Yarek and I used to play baseball as kids. The swings were rusty, the grass overgrown, and the bench I sat on had a crack that made my legs tingle whenever I shifted my weight. I tried to remember what my life had been like before the rumors, before the doubts, before suddenly realizing that those who promised to have my back were now questioning every choice I'd ever made. I thought about my friends, Maris, 26, and Theron, 29, who had been accused of influencing me, and I felt a strange mix of anger and guilt, like maybe I should have seen this coming, like maybe I had ignored signs that my parents weren't ready to let me grow up. I kept going over the words my mom had said, over and over, each time twisting them in my mind until they felt heavier than they were. "We don't think it's a good idea anymore." I wanted to argue, to yell, to beg, but I knew that wouldn't fix anything. I realized that the choice was mine, and I had to act, even if it meant stepping into the unknown alone. I started calling every local contact I could think of, old tutors, former teachers, neighbors, anything to see if someone could help me scrape together money or resources. Some offered vague advice, others were sympathetic but helpless, and a few simply shrugged, leaving me more alone than I'd felt in years. I also started quietly searching for part-time work, knowing that if I could get a job fast enough, I might be able to afford at least a bus ticket out of town. The weight of that reality pressed down on me, and I kept thinking about my scholarship letters, which now felt like cruel reminders of everything that was slipping through my fingers. I remembered my high school graduation, how proud my parents had looked, their smiles wide, their eyes bright, and I hated that memory now because it felt like a lie, like it was a brief illusion before reality slapped me awake. Every interaction with my parents felt like walking on a tightrope. Any wrong word might tip the balance, and I was terrified of losing even the little trust that remained. I started journaling in the afternoons, trying to make sense of my thoughts, venting the anger and confusion that churned inside me. It helped a little, but it also made me realize how alone I truly was. Nights were the worst, lying in bed, listening to the creaks of the house, wondering if my parents were awake, whether they were whispering about me, judging me, deciding my fate in silence. One night, I found myself shaking as I calculated exactly how much I could get from odd jobs, from selling things I owned, and how far that would take me. Each number, each plan, felt fragile, like a paper boat in a storm, and yet it was all I had. I remembered my younger brother, Linus, 22, who had always been reckless and impulsive, and for a moment, I wished he were here, someone to share the burden with, but he was off living his own life, unaware of the storm brewing in mine. I realized that I had to accept this isolation, that no one was going to hand me the life I dreamed of, that every step forward had to be earned alone. As the days passed, I started quietly packing small things, essentials, little pieces of home I couldn't live without, and each item I put in my bag felt like a declaration, a silent promise to myself that I wouldn't let this setback define me. I couldn't count on my parents, couldn't rely on anyone to make this right, and yet I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration, like the first steps on a long, uncertain journey. I sat one evening on my bedroom floor, surrounded by papers, bus schedules, and job listings, the realization that I had no fallback, no safety net, and that every decision from here on out would be mine alone hit me full force. It was terrifying, but also strangely empowering. For the first time, I began to truly understand what it meant to stand up for yourself, take ownership of your life, even when everyone else doubted you. I didn't know how I'd get through it, whether I'd make it, but I knew I had to try. The house felt quieter now, oppressive in its stillness, like it was waiting to see if I would crumble or rise, and I stayed awake that night making lists, imagining routes, planning every possible scenario for leaving, for survival, for starting over. And then, I realized the rumors that set all this off were perhaps not important. The opinions of others held no weight except what I gave them, and the sense of control, although small, though fragile, was slowly, painfully, mine again to own. This was my life, my responsibility, and my chance to prove to myself that I could survive, that I could rise above the doubt and fear and betrayal. That it wouldn't be easy, that it wouldn't go smoothly, and that I might fail, but I had no choice but to try. The quiet determination that settled over me that night was different from confidence. It was pure and raw survival instinct, and it carried me into the next morning, when I would take the first real steps toward leaving everything behind, whatever the cost. I was running on a mix of adrenaline and panic by the third week, trying to make my exit without anyone fully understanding what I was about. I'd found a part-time gig at a small diner, washing dishes and bussing tables for barely enough to cover food and a tiny savings buffer, but every tip I gained felt like proof that I could actually do this. I remember the first night I walked into the kitchen, apron tied tight, hands trembling, and the cook, Maris, 26, gave me a look like I was completely out of my depth, and maybe I was, but I pushed through anyway. I'd sit there, hands in soapy water, thinking about the scholarship letters and tuition I might never be able to pay, about my parents' cold faces and their disappointed words echoing in my head. Your friends, they're not the kind of influence we want. That stung more than anything, the idea that someone else's choices could cost me my future. I started sneaking out at night to meet Yarek, 28, who was helping me figure out travel plans and living arrangements in a city 3 hours away, and each meeting felt clandestine, like plotting an escape, which, in a sense, it was. I had a tiny backpack with essentials, bus tickets tucked in a pocket, and my heart would pound every time I imagined someone noticing, asking questions, and realizing I was leaving. I remember the evening, standing at the bus station that Friday, summer heat making the concrete shimmer, my stomach twisting, and thinking how surreal all this was. I was leaving home, my parents had abandoned promises, and I had no guarantee of anything waiting. The ride itself was grueling, every bump in the road making me question my plan, every passing mile weighing heavy on my chest. I didn't have friends yet in the city, only contacts vouched for by Yarek, and that uncertainty gnawed at me constantly. I arrived at a small apartment I had rented with the last of my money, barely big enough to stand in, but it was mine, and that tiny ownership gave me a sliver of hope. I spent the first days exploring the city, walking the streets with wide eyes, notebook in hand, mapping out the places I could work, the cheapest groceries, the libraries and study spots I could afford. The fear was constant, pressing against my ribs, but there was also a strange thrill in independence, in realizing no one could dictate my choices here. Nights were the hardest. Lying on a thin mattress, listening to the hum of traffic below, I thought about my parents, about how much I had wanted them to support me, and a bitter ache settled in my chest. But I also thought about the freedom, about the chance to prove myself without judgment, and slowly, that ache shifted into determination. I started sending applications to every college I could reach, hoping for deferments, scholarships, anything to keep my dream alive. There were setbacks, denials, delays, and more than a few moments when I cried into my pillow, feeling utterly alone, but each morning I got up and did it all over again, clinging to the idea that I could still build something out of nothing. I had moments of doubt, sure long walks at night where I wondered if I had made a mistake, but I also found small victories. A kind word from a barista, an unexpected tip, a new contact who offered advice, and each one reminded me that survival wasn't impossible. I kept imagining conversations with my parents, what I would say if I saw them again, how I would justify this choice, but mostly, I realized it didn't matter what they thought anymore. I had to live for myself. I called Yarek often, detailing the chaos, the small wins, the near breakdowns, and he would laugh, make jokes to lighten the load, and remind me that I wasn't truly alone. But every conversation ended with a reality check. Nobody was footing my bills, nobody guaranteed my success, and that responsibility was mine. I started making real friends, people who didn't care about rumors or past mistakes, who only cared about showing up and working hard and supporting each other in small ways. It was exhausting, and often I felt I was barely keeping my head above water, but slowly, the sense of control started to build. I even began to enjoy the rhythm of it, waking early, working, studying, eating, sleeping, repeating, each day a little stronger than the last. My parents remained distant in my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake, and sometimes late at night I would imagine confronting them, telling them I'd survived, I'd made it despite everything, and part of me knew it would hurt them more than any words of anger ever could. But mostly I focused on the present, on rent, on classes, on the friends who actually showed up, on proving to myself that I was capable, and slowly, painfully, the fear was replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. I was terrified, but I was alive, too, and for the first time, my choices were truly my own. By winter, I had settled into a rhythm I never thought I could handle. The apartment was still cramped, the heater barely keeping the place warm, but it was mine, and that fact, just that small fact, grounded me in ways I hadn't expected. I'd enrolled in classes, juggling work and study, often collapsing into bed exhausted, but every day, I woke up knowing I was building something on my own terms. I still thought about my parents, Oren and Leona, sometimes with anger, sometimes with a strange longing for the support I'd lost, and sometimes just in quiet moments of reflection, wondering if they even understood the consequences of what they'd done. I'd sent letters, messages, even tried calling, but every attempt either went unanswered or was met with vague excuses, and I slowly stopped expecting them to participate in my life the way I had hoped. I made new friends, like Celine, 25, who worked in a bookstore near campus and shared similar struggles, and together we laughed, shared frustrations, and helped each other survive the grind. I learned that support didn't always have to come from family. Sometimes it was the people who showed up when it mattered, even in small ways. I faced moments of fear, bills piling up, job uncertainty, and the constant worry that one misstep could unravel everything. But I learned to take each day as it came, solving problems one at a time, holding on to the small victories like lifelines. Sometime shortly after midnight, after an extended shift that left me creaky, I sat by the window of my little apartment, looking over the lights of the city, and thought about how far I'd come from the room in my childhood home where I'd first felt abandoned. And I remembered pacing that night, making lists, plotting escape routes, and realized those moments of despair had molded me into someone I didn't recognize yet admired. I had learned resilience, self-reliance, and the raw truth that sometimes people, even those you love, can let you down, but that doesn't mean your dreams are over. There were days I cried, nights I doubted, and moments I wanted to give up, but I kept moving, kept striving, and kept proving to myself I could survive alone. I thought of my little brother Linus, 22, and wondered if he knew what it means to be truly responsible, and a part of me did hope that my journey might teach him a thing or two about choices, consequences, and independence. The letters I'd once sent to my parents sat unopened on a shelf, reminders of broken promises, but they no longer held power over me. I had my own life now, messy, exhausting, imperfect, but mine entirely. As I prepared for the spring semester, registering for classes, juggling work schedules, and mapping out a budget, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. Not complete control, never complete, but enough to know I could stand on my own 2 feet and face the world as it came. And in that realization, there was freedom, hard-won and precious. I still worried about the future, still wondered if I would stumble, but the fear no longer paralyzed me. I had learned to act despite it. I thought back to the moment my parents pulled their support, to the rumors, to the fear, and I felt a strange mixture of sadness, anger, and relief. Sadness for the loss I had endured, anger at the betrayal, and relief that I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. Standing at the window, looking out at the city, I understood that life rarely gives you what you expect, that sometimes promises are empty, and that survival and growth often come from the cracks left behind by disappointment. I had chosen myself when no one else would, and that choice had carried me further than I could have imagined. I knew I still had challenges ahead, that life would test me in ways I couldn't predict, but I also knew that I had the tools, the grit, and the courage to face them. And in that quiet moment, I felt a sense of peace, a recognition that even when people fail you, even when support is pulled away, you can still create a life worth living, one small step at a time.